on all the podcast platforms. This is episode 933. I'm joined by a really, really special guest. His name is Michael Wahle. He's a former Navy and NFL offensive guard. He played for the Green Bay Packers, Carolina Panthers, and the Seattle Seahawks. He was a Pro Bowler, All-Pro in 2005. And now after his NFL career, he's doing a great job. He has a show called Process to Perform. He puts out great content out there. Everyone go check him out with this show. And obviously, we're going to start off with his playing career and his journey, and then get to his amazing show that I like. And first of all, Michael, I just want to say thank you for joining the show. It's truly an honor. And how are you and your family doing today?
Oh, hey, thanks so much for having me. We're doing great. You know, school year starting. Yeah. I got two kids that are in. I got daughters, a sophomore in high school, and a seventh grade son, and just trying to live that life, man. Just sports family. We spend a lot of time driving to and from soccer practices, and just trying to get everything in during the day. Trying to feel like you get enough. What is it? You get enough for yourself that you can make sure that you give everything to the people that you love.
Yeah. So I want to start off with your childhood growing up, and obviously you were born in Portland, Oregon. So what was that like as a kid growing up there? And when did you get interested in playing sports? And who would you say your biggest role model was?
So let me go in reverse order. So my biggest role model was always my dad. Not even close. He is still in the way that I wanted to raise my family and the man I wanted to become. I grew up in I was born in Portland, but I moved to Southern California when I was 5 years old. We were always around athletics. I always played sports. I was playing kick and chase soccer when I was 4. I was playing multi-sport athlete when I was younger, baseball, basketball, and soccer. I didn't play football until I was 14, got into high school. It was just kind of one of those things. My parents didn't want me to play tackle football until high school. And, honestly, soccer translates so well to field sports.
Yeah.
I miss, probably another question, but I miss the idea of being able to play multi-sport, be a multi-sport athlete, especially at a younger age, and all kind of the ancillary benefits of playing those different sports. I think we miss that in today's society for sure. But when I was in 3rd grade, my teacher, this is a true story. I always tell it to people just to put things in perspective for me. Like when I was in 3rd grade, my teacher asked me to write a paper on what I wanted to be when I grew up. Got that paper that everybody gets questioned for. And I wrote I was going to be a professional athlete. And it was it. I mean, I elaborated on that obviously, but it was my 3rd grade mind. That's what I was going to do. And she gave me the paper back and she said something to the effect of like, you need to think of something like more realistic. And I was like, I'll just take the bad grade and this is what I'm going to do. So it was never, that was just what I was going to be, man. Even when I got benched, when I was failing and things, like I didn't really give myself a plan B.
Yeah. So for you, obviously speaking of being multi-sport athlete, and obviously you had the chance to do that, but speaking of football, obviously before you're a guard, but did you get to learn to play different positions in football before choosing guard?
Yeah, man. So when I came into high school, I was living in a really small mountain community. Went to Rim of the World High School in San Bernardino Mountains, who's now coached by my best friend in high school, Joe Gerardo. They're doing a great job. But I was a left-handed baseball pitcher from a small town, and I could throw fast. So people thought I was going to be a quarterback. So they made me a quarterback. When my freshman year, I was a quarterback. By my junior year, I was benched because I was so bad. I could throw a baseball, couldn't throw a football. I didn't understand football at all. I didn't understand how to read coverages. I'm not even sure I knew the difference between man and zone. Yeah. Right. We didn't have any kind of complex system. Coaching staff was, I always make the joke that I didn't really play football until college because of all the successful college and professional athletes I've ever met. I went to by far the worst football program. We were never above 500. So I was lucky enough to play, quarterback, and then I was recruited, and then some defensive positions. But I was recruited as a tight end to the Naval Academy. The Naval Academy then went to the option offense, so I played blocking tight. I lost 30 pounds during boot camp. I was 205, and they're like, I guess you're going to be a blocking receiver. And then I started putting my weight back on, started lifting a lot. And when I went to spring ball my freshman year, I was like 250. And there were knee braces in my locker, and I had the number 66. And they're like, yeah, man, you're gonna be a tackle now. And so my life just, I went from being the high school quarterback to a lineman in like a year and a half. So that's a rough transition for anybody out there. That is a rough transition. So, yeah, but I was lucky enough to play a lot of positions, but I finally got to settle on guard when I got into the league, and served me well.
Yeah. So speaking of, what was that like just to learn from different positions? Obviously, being a quarterback, and what was that like being a quarterback and then the tight end also?
Well, the thing that's interesting about football is that, as opposed to a skill sport, maybe it's soccer, maybe it's basketball, where you and I can go outside right now and kick a ball around, we can shoot hoops. In football, if you want to get really good at blocking, if you want to get really good at tackling, right, coming in out of certain kind of cuts, you basically have to buy a ticket
Yeah.
to go do that. Like you got to put your stuff on, you got to go set a time, you got to go find a field. Like it's hard. And the thing that I learned about football, and I really learned it not only on the practice field with great coaches like Todd Spencer and Gene McKeon and Charlie Weatherby, our head coach, but I learned it in the strength and conditioning room with what I consider my greatest coach, not named my dad, and Phil Emery, who ended up being the general manager for the Chicago Bears, et cetera, is that there is a process that you can go through to become kind of the best version of you, right? You just have to figure out early on if it means enough to go through that process. And once you figure that out, especially in a sport like football, you can ascend. Like I never played a lineman until really I started 1 year in college.
Right.
And I played a handful of games my sophomore year. So I really played a year and a half maybe of lineman before I got drafted. And the reason being is because if you're willing to put in that work, like if you just have a little bit to you, a little bit of grit to you, and you're willing to put that in, you have somebody that can kind of help you along and give you show you the path. You have that tool set. You can catch up to everybody else in this sport real fast because most people don't want to spend an hour and a half blocking and tackling. Like I was just willing to do it.
Right. Yeah. So tell our fans about your high school career, and obviously senior year really important when all the scholarships come. And what did you learn mainly as a senior in high school before going to college?
So I'm old. So the recruiting system is different than it used to be, right? So there's not Twitter, social media, huddle, all those things didn't even exist. If you kind of were a certain height or a certain weight, you kind of, you go to Disneyland, you got to be a certain height to ride the ride. If you were that height to ride the ride, you start getting a couple letters here and there. And I'll be honest with you, I didn't even fill out the forms for the Naval Academy. I didn't even know where it was. My mom filled them out.
Wow.
But what happened as inevitably, I wasn't a good football player. I was a terrible quarterback and I didn't really have a lot of options. And I was lucky enough to get moved to tight end. I was a really good tight end my senior year, but my Eric Connaughton, our quarterback, then good friend of mine, broke his arm halfway through the season. So I went from like a leader in receptions and touchdowns in the county to nothing for the rest of the year. So I was very fortunate just to get an offer to go to the Naval Academy. I had those offers and luckily both my parents were adamant about my academics. So I had a lot of Ivy League opportunities, but the Naval Academy was the only place that my parents didn't have to pay to go to college. And it was the only place I had an opportunity to play against, big time Division I opponents a couple times a year. And that really made the decision easy, despite not really knowing too much about where I was going, about what that actually meant.
Yeah. So obviously, what was it like for you going to playing for Navy, actually going to Naval Academy, and obviously with Veterans Day coming up tomorrow, it's a big thing. And so what was it like representing Navy in college?
Well, I think I met some of the finest humans that I've ever been around, especially at the Naval with a lot of the athletes and the football team at Naval Academy. And there's a brotherhood there that is unbreakable for certain. It is, everyone talks about the Army Navy game. Certainly that's a great opportunity to play in a game that means so much to so many people across the globe. I just learned so much from the coaching staff there that I really didn't even appreciate until I got out of there. But just the loyalty, the love, the discipline, the professionalism that they approach their work with, and just the opportunity to play with guys. Playing at a service academy, you're getting the purest form of the sport because none of these guys have any expectations to play past the Army Navy game, the last game of their season. Their senior year. They know they're not going to the pros. There's none of that pretense. And so you're getting their best every single day because that's the last time they're ever going to be able to do it. And they don't want to be in Bancroft Hall getting, yelled at by a bunch of upperclassmen. So you're going to get their best, the joy that they have to go play every single day, the intensity of our practices. It served me so well throughout the rest of my career because, again, as I talked about before, I was just willing to do things that most guys from Auburn, Alabama, Ohio State, Oregon, they might be better athletes than me, but they weren't willing to pay that price every day. because they didn't have to. And I did. And I learned that that was okay. And so I can't think, especially that coaching staff and the way that they ran ran everything. I learned so much from them.
Yeah. So speaking of playing Army and Air Force and getting to play Notre Dame too, Navy play. Actually, speaking of, they played Notre Dame last weekend. But for you, what was it like playing against that type of competition, and especially against the Army and then Air Force and Notre Dame, like that, those type of teams?
Well, I think anytime you're playing against one of the service academies, it's a big deal there. Obviously, there's a Commander in Chief's trophy. The game that I actually played the entire game in, we kind of went into that game knowing that we were a much better team than Army. So, once you take all the pretense out of it and you just understand that when it comes down to it, they still have to play us on the field. It's just another game like anything else. I don't think the idea that you play harder in some games than others. Maybe other people do, but I never saw things that way. Certainly you get up for a game like Notre Dame because you're in South Bend. We used to always play in South Bend back in the day, excuse me. And we felt, honestly, a couple of times when we went in there, we thought we had the capability. Ron Powell was their quarterback back in the day, but we thought we had the capability of actually beating them. Like, we thought we could beat them on that day. And we came pretty darn close a couple of times. I know they've beat them since, but listen, what you really see is the disparity in like a bona fide Division I star, 5-star recruit. And then what we were dealing with, but still giving teams difficulty because of our discipline, our grit, our resiliency, because of the running the option offense and those things. Like, you see how you can affect a game with behaviors, maybe more so than athleticism.
Yeah. So one of our co-hosts who's part of the show, her name is Kia. She wanted to know if you played with Arash Banekar when you were in Navy.
I don't remember that name.
No. Okay.
Sorry.
That's all right. Yeah. So obviously, now tell our fans about your draft experience. It was interesting because you went to the supplemental draft, 1998, right, round 2 with the Green Bay Packers. So take us through that process. What was that like?
So supplemental draft is for knuckleheads like myself who don't time into the regular draft. So it's basically it's a blind auction. If everybody knows what a blind auction is, that basically means you go up and people put in a blind bid dependent on their next year's projected draft status. So I think I had, I had a couple pro day workouts, and obviously I'm coming from an option offense. So we never ran pro style. I didn't know how to take a pass set. I didn't know how to get in an offensive lineman stance that you would see from an NFL offensive lineman. Like, I didn't know how to do that stuff. So a lot of it was just based on the fact that I'm from the Naval Academy. I'm pretty good at this combine stuff. I can kind of get around, and maybe I had some decent interviews. I don't know. But so what basically happens is that you get a phone call from a team that day. And I guess Green Bay decided that they were going to have a late second round pick. And they must have decided that the Giants, a couple of these other teams, were going to maybe pick me up in the third round with their earlier picks. So they made this decision to pick me up in the second round with now it's going to be 1999 draft pick, but it's a 1998 supplemental draft. And so I get this phone call from Ron Wolf, Packers GM at the time, just telling me, listen, you're coming up to Green Bay. And that's one of the teams I think I had visited from the pre-draft. It's crazy now, because, it's like, Ted Thompson picked me up. Yeah. He was a scout. John Dorsey kind of took me aside and told me not to screw this up. John Schneider was there. Wow. You start going through Mike Holmgren. It's like, man, that was an incredible staff. Wow. And I was lucky enough to kind of, be part of that, be part of Ron Wolf's legacy over in Green Bay, and Mike for the last year he was there. So it was, anytime you get drafted by what at that point they had just won the Super Bowl, they were going to the second Super Bowl, and what a treat.
I'm just curious for you, was it tough not being in the draft process and then waiting for the supplemental draft?
No, I mean, listen, when I left the Naval Academy, it was, I was just so thrilled for the opportunity to play football again. And then when I started talking to agents and the idea that came up that you're good enough to go play in the NFL and these teams actually want you. It was just something that, again, we talked about before. That's what I always wanted to do, but I didn't know if that opportunity was going to actually happen. And so when I found out that I had that chance, it's just, you just double down and work even harder.
Yeah. We just want to say thank you for your service, by the way, being with Navy.
Well, I'm very, very clear on everything. I was an employee of the United States Navy, but I was never actively employed or deployed, excuse me. Like I have tons of friends that are in the Marine Corps and United States Navy that are what I would call the true veterans, the people that we're trying to honor on days like today. And certainly, my thanks and gratitude goes out to all of those people.
Yeah, so I want to ask you now. Obviously, getting drafted by a great organization in Green Bay, and you got throughout the years, you got to play with Matt Hasselbeck, Reggie White, Brett Favre. I can go down the list. So, what was it like just being with that franchise and playing in front of that fans? Because Lambeau Field, and then I love their history, their fan base, and what was that like for you as a player?
It was awesome. I am going to take note that you said Matty Hasselbeck first. I know now you've told me about the Seahawks deal. Like now I get it. But so listen, Matty and I were actually drafted in the same draft class. Like we used to get dropped on Fridays. So back in the day, they dropped 5 players. Like, so only 47 or 48 guys would actually dress. We got dropped on Fridays. So Matty and I, and like his brother Tim, who you see on ESPN, his little brother Nats, they'd show up and we'd be hanging out on Saturdays when the team was like traveling to go play the Seahawks or something. Our rookie year, we'd be sitting at home. We were like practice squad players, or we were like, we didn't have that, like the luxury of being even able to travel early on. But playing with guys like Roy Butler, Reggie White, Brett, Chewy, Frank Winters, one of the guys who really got me through my rookie year. Frank Winters, Jeff Dellenbach, these 2 veteran offensive linemen. I didn't get coached my rookie year. They flat out just said, "Hey, we're not coaching you." I showed up late. I held out. Mike, it was a great story. Where Mike chews me out the minute I get on the field for the first time. Tom Lavatt, the headline coach, is like, "Sorry, man, I'm not coaching you this year." Like Mike says, you're not playing. He was so mad at me and my agent for holding out. But Jeff Dellenbach and Frank Winters just really did me a solid. But that locker room, being able to go into that locker room and just like the air of confidence that they had about themselves and how secure they were. The one thing that I try to tell athletes now that I learned from those guys is, a lot of, especially in football, we manufacture a lot of emotion. Right. We think we have to get really amped up, bang our heads against the wall. Like a lot of people have seen the program, they're like spitting each other's mouth and slapping each other around. And like, you're trying to do that because at the end of it, you're scared. Like you're scared there's going to be some sort of, you're going to get hurt. It's, it's a violent sport. You're scared you're going to get embarrassed. And we really don't operate as humans very well when we're in that, that sympathetic state. Like we need to get that parasympathetic state where we're actually calm, confident, right? Muscles are we have tension, but we're not tense. And those guys showed me early on where if you work hard and you're good, like you have confidence in your preparation, you don't need to act like a tough guy. You don't need to go do all this other stuff. You can just go out there, have fun with your friends. It's like we work hard, kick ass, and take a lot of pride in both, right? That's what it's all about.
Yeah. So speaking of Mike Holmgren, and obviously you guys have played underneath great coaches throughout your career. So speak to me about, tell our fans about Mike Holmgren, because this guy, I feel like he can still coach in the league if he wants to, and a heck of a coach. Yeah. And what was that like learning from him?
So again, it was kind of a weird year being a rookie, and that was his last year in Green Bay because they had that split general manager head coach job, and that was not a thing yet in the NFL. I think that's why one of the reasons he went to Seattle. So one thing that I'll say about Mike, and I really like Mike. Mike was a teacher first, and we really don't have that in the NFL as much anymore. Like that is a lost art. There's knowing, there's coaching, there's teaching. And he was a teacher. He had a staff full of teachers. His coaching tree is unheralded, full of future head coaches. And the reason is they were teachers and they wanted you to understand concepts, and they took the time to teach technique. It mattered to them. It wasn't just about putting up X and O's on the board, learning a scheme, and it was just plug and play with every opponent. Like it was back then, the players were the most important output. It wasn't about the coordinator's intelligence. It was about how good we could make our players. I miss that largely about the sport now, and I really appreciated that about Mike.
Yeah, so this is all right, this is a 2-part question. Obviously, like I brought up earlier, the fan base and Lambeau Field, and for you, what was it like getting to cover for Brett Favre throughout your career, and then also playing in front of that fan base in Lambeau Field?
So Lambeau's like Yankee Stadium for football guys. It's the best stadium in the country. It's got the best fans in the country. It's right downtown Green Bay, or there's houses all around it. There's nothing like it. I've never been to another stadium that compares. I think Kansas City's pretty close. But for me, it's it's an amazing opportunity to be able to play in that kind of in that kind of city with that kind of fan base, with people who just allow you to be you, are comfortable around you. It really was an honor, and it was something that when I left, I didn't realize how special it was until I was away from there and experienced other things. That you realize how special Lambeau Field actually is. Being able to listen when you get to play for a Hall of Fame quarterback, especially as an offensive lineman, you love it, but there's also a lot of, well, if anything goes wrong, who's it on, right? It's on us. So being able to play with somebody like that, and again, it's not even as much what he was able to do on the field, which was amazing, but the way that he carried himself, the confidence that he had, the way that he made you feel at ease in the huddle, those things that oftentimes go unsaid are so important to, especially, a young developing offensive lineman. It's so important to your growth process. So I mean, listen, if you can play for a Hall of Famer or play for a scrub, obviously you're going to play for the Hall of Famer, right? But I'm sure he's kind of a different cat. He's in a different category in the way that he approaches everything. So he's a special guy.
Yeah, so I know obviously NFL is a business, and a lot of players move around, and so some players want to spend their career with one team. But for you, what was it like? How hard was it for you leaving the team that drafted you? But you got to experience two other good organizations in Carolina and Seattle.
Yeah. So when it was time to go, like my wife and I thought it was time to go. I didn't think that I was. I just didn't think I was getting there. I thought it was one of the best guards in the league. I wasn't getting the recognition I deserved. I think we had some personality issues in with my offensive line coach there. And I didn't respect how special a place Green Bay was. I thought you just go replicate that somewhere else. We hadn't had a really good defense in a number of years. And I went to Carolina. Carolina was tops on my list of places to go because they were the best defense that we played every year. They had Chris Jenkins, Dan Morgan, Julius Peppers, Mike Rucker, Will Witherspoon. Mike Minner. I mean, they were just stacked on defense. And so I was always like, man, if I could just get to a good defense, we could really do something here. So lucky to go play down there, get that opportunity. And, unfortunately, I got hurt my second year there. And when I got hurt, everything just kind of went south with continuing to play despite being injured, which I shouldn't have done, which I'm like, that whole world has changed as far as players being advocates for themselves and kind of understanding what their rights are versus, we just used to be like, well, I'll tape it up and keep playing, even though it's going to, have a long-term effect on my life. But the way the surgery was handled, rehab, everything just went really bad. And it kind of soured our relationship with that team. And I was so lucky to be able to kind of get released and come to an amicable resolution there. And then even for a year, get to go play with the Seattle Seahawks organization, who at the time was owned by Paul Allen, and Mike Holmgren that was his last year in Seattle. And he brought me back. Matt Hasselbeck was the quarterback I had been drafted with, knew some guys on their line, obviously get to play with the great Walter Jones, best player I've ever seen in football, period, point blank. I had him at his worst, and he was still the best player I had ever seen. And I had Hall of Famers in my huddle. That organization made me fall in love with football again, because I'd really kind of fallen off with the way things had turned out in Carolina. So thankful to be up there. Great city, great fan base, as I'm sure you know. And, it let me, even though I got injured again and was not able to continue my career as long as I wanted to because of that shoulder, it really let me finish on terms I was satisfied with, because I was still in love with the sport, and I didn't have a lot of the regrets, I think, that a lot of the, unfortunately, a lot of my teammates over the years have to live with.
Yeah. So speaking of, we had a couple of your former teammates on the show we had Walter Jones on the show last year. It was an honor talking to him. We also had your guy Nate Burleson on the show too.
Nate B. Yep.
Yeah. So for you, obviously, speaking of when you were in Carolina, what even though it didn't work out well, but what did you like about that franchise and that team while you were there? What do you like about Carolina?
Well, listen, we went to the NFC Championship. What happens usually with teams like that is when your quarterback gets hurt. When Jake got hurt my second year there, Jake Delhomme was our quarterback. When he gets hurt, all of a sudden, You got David Carr, coming to back you up when we have meeting time, you can't find him because he's playing Halo in the back, right? Like it's just like life's different when you don't have your starting quarterback. And I went there because of their defense. I went there really for two reasons, and it's kind of like this is how it goes, right? But I went there for their defense, and man, did I love watching Steve Smith play, and I wanted to play with that dude, right? And our defense was always great. I mean, were they the top in the league every year? No, but they were really good, solid defense. Offensively, I think it's really tough when you go to a team like I was a top 3 offensive player in Green Bay. Like our team was a top 3 offense every single year. Our expectations were through the roof. Like we didn't drop 30 or 27 a game. We were angry. And when you go to a place like Carolina, it's a defensive-minded club. John Fox is a defensive-minded head coach. And his thing was like, hey, if we score 17, 18 points, we're going to win every game because we're going to hold – our defense is going to win the game for us. And so for my – it's really hard. Like for a professional athlete who wants to be the best version of themselves, it's really hard to strive for average. Yeah. Right? And that's what they asked. And they were asking us to essentially strive for average. And that was really, really hard. Could some of those conversations be handled better? Absolutely. But ultimately, like you want to be the best version of you. You don't ever want to strive for average. And I think that's, part of the issue that I had playing there. Although, again, being able to play with a top defense and some really, really good guys in that locker room, it was it's part of life's a journey, man. And that was certainly part of it.
Yeah. So I'm just curious, before we get to your Seahawks career, I just want to know why you were not respected that much in your career, because obviously you're one of the best guards in my opinion. But what do you know the reason why you didn't get enough respect in the league with the team?
Well, how do you mean?
Like with the NFL, like what? How come they need to? So I feel like they need to do a better job respecting some of these players that they. So you said earlier you didn't get that much respect, but do you know the reason why?
Oh yeah, for sure. So. I mean, listen, well, first of all, it's multi-layered for me. I came in not really know what I was doing. I struggled for 3 years. I played left tackle. My third year, I was playing left tackle. I had no technique. I was awful. I got benched, and I got benched deservedly. So I did not have the right process to be successful in the league. I turned that around my 4th year. And then, I'm very kind of proud of the way my career turned out after that. So there's that part of it, but you have to remember, especially and by respect, I guess what I was saying was I thought I was a top guard in the league and I should be getting these awards. Right. And when you don't get those, you start trying to figure out why. And then there's reasons behind why you might get, like for 2 years, I was a top 3 in the coaches voting and the players voting, but I wasn't even top 10 in the fan votes. Right. So I didn't really get that love from the fan base there. And there's some reasons that, that really not even worth rehashing, that until I left and they realized the Green Bay, like I always make a joke, like the Green Bay Packers voted me into the Pro Bowl. Right. Like their fans voted me into the Pro Bowl. It was just a year late because they realized once I left that, okay, man, he was probably pretty good because we're 4-12 now and he's going to the NFC Championship. Like that's the kind of stuff that happens sometimes. You get kind of either labeled to get put in a rut. I mean, listen, when I say that, there's nothing but love for Green Bay fans, and there's a huge acknowledgement that, listen, when you struggle early, like you're gonna have to shovel that weight for a long time, right? And sometimes you have to change environments to kind of get that respect that you think you deserve, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's unfortunate sometimes in my situation because I would have loved to have just stayed there. Looking back at my career, loved to have been a 13-year and Green Bay Packer, but. You play the hand you're dealt.
Yeah. Yeah. So now going to your Seahawks career, tell our fans about that, playing in front of that fans, 12th man, the crowd. You got to play with Julius Jones, Justin Forsett. Obviously, you just mentioned Walter Jones, Hall of Famer. So what was that like for you? And seeing that you had a great defense too that year, Jason Babin, Michael Bennett, no, not Michael Bennett, sorry. You can go down the list, but what was it like for you?
So that was Mike's last year. It was a really, really difficult year, I think, for everybody. I think all 5 offensive linemen ended up on IR at one point. I hurt my regret for Seattle was I thought it was such a wonderful community. I thought it was such a wonderful organization. The people were so, I can't say enough good things about Seattle, at the Seattle Seahawks organization. And it was just disappointing for me because I wasn't the same player that I had been before my injury. I couldn't produce for them the way that I wanted. So there's that frustration, I think, on my end. But playing it used to be called Quest, but playing in I think it's called the Link now.
Yeah, the Link.
Yeah, and being able to play with Maddie and being able to play with JJ and Walter Jones, Lofa Tutupu, I mean, Big Play Babs, like I love those. Brian Russell, like I Patrick Kearney, I love those guys, man. It was such a great group, and it's just one of those deals. Sometimes, there's a little bit of chance and luck that goes into how your year is going to go, and when you have that many people on IR, it's just really tough to be successful. But again, like it's all we talked about before. You're there for the journey, and I was just very, very thankful to be able to be part of that organization, even if it was for only a year.
Yeah. So looking back at your career, and how grateful are you to be in this position, a Pro Bowler, All Pro, and what would you say your best experience was throughout your career and the best moments in your career?
Oh wow. Well, listen, being able to, I just love to compete. And I love those opportunities. And I love the opportunities where, or I guess I should say, I love the situations where preparation meets opportunity. And whether you're going into your first playoff game versus Dana Stubblefield, whether you're going to the NFC Championship versus Seattle, whether you're running out of the Packers Stadium for the first time and the guy screws your name up, it's like all those things are so great. But what you remember, players always say what they really remember is the relationships they had. And I think that's certainly true, but I was always, I loved preparing for the game as much as I enjoyed actually playing. And so I think about all the days of going out and practice and like people are down and I'm kind of looking around like, who am I going to get today? And I just love that so much. And a lot of that was, I think, because I was lucky enough to go to the Naval Academy and play with that coaching staff and those players. But I just love that part of the game so much that, I can't really discern. I don't have like favorite plays. I loved all of it.
So obviously, who was the toughest defensive player that you had to face throughout your career?
Yeah, John Randall, and it was a combination of he was at his best, and I was just starting out my first, second year. Sorry, excuse me, my second year I started at left guard, and I remember I had to play him, and I just remember it was like our first 3rd and 8, and he used to go through the fan book, and so he knew my nickname from college was Beagle after Ronnie Beagle, All-American at the Naval Academy. And so it's 3rd and 8. And I just hear this like in the huddle. I was like, Beagle. And I was like, oh shoot, is that him? And I turn around and he's like, B. And I go, oh, I'll be there in a minute. Hi, like trying to like act like I'm not scared. And I was like, oh man, this can be bad. But he was a unique talent. We had obviously there was years where we had John Randall and Warren Sapp, twice a season when they were all in the same division. Man, that was tough. You want to earn your chops in the NFL, man, go play in the NFC North during that time.
Yeah. So now tell our fans about your show. Obviously, you're doing great things after your career. You have this show called Process to Perform. How did this come about, and how grateful are you to have this platform to share your stories and talk about other topics that are going on in sports, and obviously a lot of important stuff going on. But how did your show come about?
So it was kind of the same thing. I was when I retired, I went into finance, kind of went and got my MBA, did the whole, went to work for a hedge fund, the whole thing. And I just missed football. I just miss being around sports. I love being around athletes. I love that atmosphere. And I thought I had something still to kind of impart, like knowledge wise. When you get old and broken down, like ex-athletes are, the last thing you have to give is that knowledge and kind of that tool set. So I went back and worked in the league for a couple of years and just saw that there was such a huge discrepancy in the way that athletes were being prepared for success.
Yeah.
Right. And we can kind of go into the reasons for that if you'd like, but really it came down to, they didn't have the tool set to be kind of the best version of themselves. And so through that, I started working with some guys on the side. Obviously I have 2 kids that are coming up and, started kind of looking around training. How can we make this the most effective thing going? And when COVID hit and we all shut down, I just wanted to get some of this information off my chest, and the podcast was the easiest way to do it. So we started the Process to Perform podcast. It's all based on player development. We talked with, players, parents, and coaches, And it's really just focuses on the process of becoming the best version of you. And so every week we just try to hit a topic that's surrounding that. Sometimes it's topical to something that's going on in the world that week, but usually it's just about, if you're a parent, player, or coach, these things are conversations that you're probably having at the dinner table, or it's conversations you might want to have at the dinner table with your athlete, trying to understand how to be the best version of you. And that, that has rolled into, luckily for me, a business where I work with pros down to preteens, working on, what I call the total athlete development platform. And it's mindset development, technical mastery, and making ownership decisions in the best interest of future you. We work on those three themes to help your athletes become elite. And it's been a very gratifying experience, because you get to go reach out and help a lot of athletes at different levels across all sports. It's not football based, it's athlete based. Mm-hmm. And it's really been a lot of fun. And then again, of course, I'm sure that Ahman Green and I now do on the Believe Network, we do the On My Block podcast, Packers podcast. We kind of review and recap that week's game. Obviously a lot going on this last week with Rodgers and the Chiefs, but we get a lot of, we digress a little bit on there. We get a little bit off topic, but it's great to reunite with Ahman Green, who was, Packers all-time leading rusher, fantastic human. And just having a lot of fun with all this stuff. You know how it is.
Yeah. So speaking of, so obviously, how often do you record this podcast, the process to perform? Because I see you always put content out there. And so how often do you guys record this one?
So I try to record it once a week. I was doing two for a while, but really I try to record it once a week and then try to record we always do the other podcast in season once a week. Should I be putting out more content? Who's to say, but it's really important to me that the content I put out can actually move the dial for people. And you know how it is now. There's the great thing about the internet is the same thing as the problem with the internet. There's so many experts that, it's like watching Pro Football Focus, right? You listen to Pro Football Focus, they have no contextual intelligence whatsoever. Right. So their rankings really mean, to a guy like me, mean nothing, but to the broader group, they mean everything. I mean, people do whole podcasts, off of those things. I'm not trying to harp on them. It just is what it is. And so when I produce content on Process to Perform, I really want to make sure that I'm not doing it just to fill space. I just want to make sure that it's that theme or that idea that we're trying to kind of seed out in that episode has some value for the parents and the coaches and the players that we're speaking to.
Yeah. So obviously now I want to ask you, speaking of doing a podcast with Ahman Green, I need to ask you, does Aaron Jones remind you a little bit of Ahman Green? I'm not saying he's there yet, but do you see himself as Ahman Green?
So Ahman had a really unique running style. He was a little bit bigger guy, right? Had elite speed. Like nobody knows this, but like in Ahman Green's pro day, he ran like a 4.18 in Nebraska. Like, it was like ridiculous number. It didn't even seem like a real number to me, right? He ran like a 4.18 in Nebraska. So I think Aaron Jones is an incredible running back. He has for someone his size, he's tough. He knows how to get that extra yard without taking that extra hit. Right. So he'll like give you a shoulder, or he'll run at a hip, or he'll do something to kind of take that pressure off. He's not afraid to put his head down. He's great out of the backfield. He used to struggle with blitz pickup. He's done a much better job this year. Obviously having that 1-2 punch with him and AJ Dillon has been fantastic. AJ Dillon's only getting better. I think he's had his best 2 games the last 2 weeks, but yeah, I mean, it's fair to say that those guys, have some glimpses of Ahman, but like, to me, Ahman's in his own category.
Yeah, so I know that now for you being back in football in a different aspect, and do we see Michael Wahle being a coach in the future?
So I went that route. I was in Miami for 4 years, and I don't know. It's a good question if I would ever go back into that environment. I really like this environment where you have a little more freedom of expression. You're more efficient with your time, and you get to actually focus in on improving individuals, right? It's not, we talked about it before. The game has changed. The buildings have changed. There's some buildings that are still hold the same values that I do, as far as, hey, let's, how do you make a building the best version of itself, right? What do you really have to do? You have to invest in the success of the individuals that are providing the output for your service, right? So if you really want to make a building the best version that it can be, you have to invest in the development of your individual athletes. And we don't really do a good job of that anymore at the professional level. I think at the college level as well, because that's why these guys are coming in not ready to play. And so whether or not that you're capable of doing that without ruffling too many feathers in the NFL, I don't know if that's possible, right? Like I certainly tried to do it and had a hard time. So I don't know if it's possible to do something like that, but yeah, the more like, listen, the good thing about, guys like me who played at a high level, you want to work with high level athletes because that language is the same. And the transfer between me showing you something and you doing it, that happens pretty fast because these guys are better athletes than they used to be. Like we're evolving as humans, right? But the process that they're going through is a little bit different. So I don't know that as if we're just saying professionals, I don't know on par if everybody's kind of at that same place.
Yeah. So tell our fans, what do you like about today's offensive lineman? I'm a big Dallas Cowboy fan, and for the last 5-6 years, we had the best offensive line group. But for you, what do you like about today's group, offensive line group that you like? And obviously, you're well connected with Marquise Pouncey, the two brothers that recently retired. And actually, he commented underneath the post on my post saying, Marquise said that you're one of the best intelligent leaders out there when you were playing, and even after your career. That's what he said about you underneath the post.
That's nice. So Marquise is the man. I mean, both those guys. So those guys are unique. So those guys are both unicorns. Like they're twin unicorns because the way that, and I was so lucky to be around Mike because when you see guys play, I think I alluded to this earlier. Like when I got into the league from the Naval Academy, I was walking around like, all I have to do is play as hard as I can, try to do whatever you're asking me to do the best I can, as hard as I can every single day. And you're going to pay me money. I don't have to go to school anymore. Like this is the best job in the world. And some guys just don't think that way. Everything's a burden. I don't want to work hard today. I want to go half speed. I don't want to go 50% with perfect form. I want to go half speed with lazy form. Mike Pouncey was a consummate pro. Now some people could get mad at him because he demanded so much of himself and then from the people around him. But he was such a professional in the way that he went about his business that he didn't have a choice but to be great.
Right.
Like Marquise didn't have a choice but to be great because they put themselves in that position every single day. And most people aren't willing to do that. And so when you ask about like, who do I like watching as far as offensive line people or groups?
Yeah.
The easiest answer is the Cleveland Browns.
Right.
Because Bill Callahan has proven to be, if not one of the best coaches in the league. And they have Scott Peters running us since the offensive line coach. Scott Peters was my teammate, my backup in Carolina. He's got a really incredible story. Bottom line, when he got out of the NFL because of injury, he became a jiu-jitsu world champion and learned how martial arts translates into making the best version of offensive linemen from a like hand leverage, everything. And he's a really good technical coach. And he's a really good coach, but he specializes in some of this technique stuff that he's learned from the translation between martial arts and football. And so the way that they play and again, it's the same idea, right? We work hard, we kick ass, and we love doing both, right? And I'm sure that's their mantra as well. And so when you look at them, when you look at Zach Martin, you talk about Tyron Smith, how good he's been over the years. I know he's hurt right now.
Yeah.
Laramie Tunzel's like probably got the best technique for left tackle in the NFL. But you look at guys like Trent Williams, who just is old school, physically like. How many guys do you get to watch now that just love putting people over piles, throwing people on the ground? Just like, I love that part of the game. And we don't see it that much anymore because it's almost like because they know they're going to dinner, later with one another, like they're too friendly. But I just like the old school. Hey man, we're going to go out there and I'm going to give you my absolute best. And I'm going to make you more worried about me than getting to the quarterback, into the running back. You're worried about what I'm about to do to you. And all your focus comes here. And so you're not worried about, like, you got those blinders on. All of a sudden, you're not worried about the quarterback. You're not worried about the running back. You're worried about me putting you on the pile or you just trying to get away from me and defeat me. So I love those guys. Those are my kind of guys.
Obviously, we used to have Bill Callahan in Dallas, and we miss him as a coach over there, man. He's one of the best when it comes to all.
Joe Philbin's doing a hell of a good job with that group. Yeah. Joe Philbin's doing a hell of a good job. He was our old coach in Green Bay.
Yeah.
He and I met him at the University of Iowa years ago. He's doing a really nice job because, again, Lyle Collins out, right? Random. injuries. Tyron Smith out now, right? And they've had to deal with injuries the last couple of years. And you just see, you see how important certain positions, like Tyron Smith goes out for that game. They can't do anything, right? It's like, you thought Zach Martin was your best player until Tyron Smith left. And then you're like, oh, okay, well, he might be the best player, but he might not be the most valuable player. It's this guy over here playing left tackle. So got to account for it all.
Hey, maybe you never know. We would love to have you as a coach over there in Dallas.
Well, I'll tell you what, like I said, I think Joe Philbin
does
Joe
a remarkable job. Yeah, he's doing a great job.
I think he does a remarkable job. And again, you know what I love about Joe, and I've told Joe this a million times, like he's a teacher.
Yeah.
Joe's interested in teaching, and it is a rarity in the sport now. And I have so much respect for Joe Philbin.
Yeah. So a couple more things before we let you go. I want to switch to an important topic. This is a big deal to me, and I love talking about this, and everybody should really start talking about this on their shows. Mental health with athletes is a big thing. And I'm connected with the mental health coach. His name is Bill Dean. I have his shirt. It mentions everything here. So for you, when it comes, for example, not only NFL, but you see NBA, like Kevin Love coming out telling his story and other players. So what do you like about these players now, not being afraid, just telling their stories about mental health issues and what they've been through now in this generation?
Yeah, it's funny. I didn't know you were going to bring this up, but I literally, the podcast I released this morning is in part on this. Really, it's like what's the most important ability is availability, but it's also reliability. And what's the center of reliability is you got to have your stuff together physically, mentally, and emotionally. I love the difference in athletes today, just in broad sense, is that because of technology, because of access, transparency, right, connectivity, they build a brand now, and they know that they're willing and able to ask questions, and they have a platform to do so. Do they feel empowered in a way that we didn't even know was an option? Like, it's not, and it makes me sick to my stomach. I think it was Marcellus Wiley went on and was talking about how, these people are soft, or, they need to focus on the fact they're playing too many video games and relating that to mental health. And it's like, the environment has changed, and the structure of a brain is different now than it was 50 years ago. Like, we have structurally changed because of technology, video games, social media, all of these things. Your long-term memory, your task attentional aptitude, that has changed. Like, we're task switchers now, which is another way of saying we have a hard time focusing on stuff, right? All of these things have an effect on how your brain works structurally, and how that now resonates with you on a day-to-day basis, emotionally, behaviorally, etc. So when you have people that are dealing with anxiety, dealing with depression, and are willing to talk about it now, because before that was that language 20 years ago was for the weak-minded.
Yeah.
And we didn't talk about it because we didn't want to admit that we needed to see a psychologist, psychiatrist. But the fact that you can now be proactive, stand up, and not worry about losing your job, right? Not worry about being ostracized publicly. There's still people who are going to talk, of course. But the fact that they're brave enough to do it, because it's a real thing. And it's sad, I think, in this day and age, that we still think that's not a real thing. Do people, like anything else, do people take advantage of language and use it to their advantage when things aren't true? Absolutely. That happens in every form or fashion in life. But is this a real thing that we need to be able to have conversations about and point people in the right direction to help? I work with the Hall of Fame Behavioral Health Platform for this exact reason, because I would rather, if that phone call's too hard to make that first phone call, make it to me. I'll help you in however I can. I'll point you in the right direction if I can. But as an ambassador for them, I just think it's so important to get that word out. There's so many guys I played with, so many wives of guys that I played with, that my wife talks to, that have these issues, right? Especially post-playing career, where that thing is gone. They don't know what the new thing's going to be. And, my hat's off to Naomi Osaka. My hat's off to Terry Bradshaw, right? All these guys and these men and women who are willing to stand up and say, listen, I have this thing. We're dealing with it. It's a real thing. Simone Biles, it's a real ADHD. It's a real thing. Michael Phelps, it's a real thing. So my hat's off to all those athletes. Absolutely.
Yeah, no, for you, speaking of that platform you have, what's it like? What's it been like for you being an ambassador for that program?
Well, it's new for me. Hopefully again, the hope is that you just get those, it's always like the starfish, past the waves, man. If you help one starfish, you've won. And so if anybody wants to, have that conversation, you see me on platforms like this, you see me on podcasts or whatever, and you say like, I remember that guy. I'm familiar with him. If it's an ex-player, ex-teammate, I know who he is. Like, I just reach out, and you can reach out. You can go on the VidSig platform. You can hit me at mike@process2perform.com. Like, reach out, and we will talk. And I can help you, point you in the direction to get the help that you might require. You might want to, check out further. But that first conversation or that first phone call is always so difficult. Mm-hmm. So just being able to maybe see somebody that's familiar to you, I think really helps that platform.
Yeah. So before we get to the last two things, I want to ask you about the Packers this year, and obviously with the Aaron Rodgers situation. I'm kind of, it's like kind of weird because now with you see him on this on the Pat McAfee show weekly now every Tuesday it is. And he says different things coming every week about his vaccination stuff and being immunized. And so what are your thoughts, overall thought? Obviously, you and Ahman Green pay close attention to this team. And then with the prospect of getting Odell Beckham, maybe, potentially, we don't know. But so what are your thoughts on this team and Aaron Rodgers so far?
So team-wise, it's like last week was a good kind of temperature check of where we're at. Defensively, just dramatically improved from last year, dramatically improved from the beginning of this year. Love the way that Rashad Gary's coming along. He's got a move now. Like, he's got a move, a go-to move. Kenny Clark, I know went out with the lower back injury last week, but he's been playing lights out. Kevin King was struggling mightily the last season and at the beginning of this season, and he's come back the last 2 weeks and he is playing well. And so when Jared Alexander comes back, I know Stokes got hurt when he comes back. Like, we have three guys that I think we might be able to trust. Safety play, Savage and Amos have been playing really well. Yeah. So obviously Campbell in the middle, I think he's player of the month last month, and he's been playing lights out. It's like, it's amazing what happens when you get a change in environment, how much more effective a player he is. So I just love where we're trending there. Special teams was atrocious last week, so we'll shelve them. And then look, you got Aaron Rodgers, arguably the biggest talent in his generation. Offensive line's been beat up and they're still winning. It just shows you how good he is. They travel to Arizona. No Bakhtiari, no Myers. Nobody talked about Josh Myers, the first round, or the pick from. The pick from Ohio State, but then they're missing three receivers, MVS, Lazard, and obviously Devontae Adams. They still go out and win. It just points to how special a guy like that is. With regards to like all the COVID, this stuff, like it feels different this time. Aaron comes off as one of those guys where he certainly thinks he's the smartest guy in any room he walks into. I've always said, like, I think that's actually charming. Like, I think it's like part of his deal. I like it. I like that he's always got that smirk on his face. Like, I'm pulling one over on you. Didn't feel that way this time. It felt kind of, I'm just trying to put myself in the shoes of a teammate. Does everybody have the same information? Are they all dealing with the same set of truths? Like, are you putting me in harm's way? If everybody was on the up and up, that's one thing. Is he deceiving everybody around the league? Like, again, what people need to understand is, like, the league knew.
Yeah.
Right. And the team knew. And so while he had deceived the media, and the media has every right to be upset about that, the whole thing just is another demonstration, really, of how what every player knows is there are certain players that don't have to play by the rules, and we can complain about it. We can not like it. But the fact is, there's players in this league, and there's players in this league in the past that will fail a drug test and get up. There'll be a phone call, and they're no longer failed a drug test. That happens, right? Or at least I should say, I don't have proof of that, but that is talked about all the time. So when you think about, is Aaron Rodgers going to get fined $14,000 when I just heard CeeDee Lamb got like $20,000 for like pulling his socks down or something? It's like, you got to be joking. But listen, if Roger Goodell has been anything, right, he has been consistently inconsistent with his honesty, right, and his transparency. So, like, none of this really surprises you. I just think it's unfortunate the way that Aaron presented his case, and then felt like it was, the Pat McAfee show was, and the Joe Rogan comments, like, it just doesn't sit well. But I don't think long term it really matters. I mean, we win a Super Bowl this year. It's like,
it goes away. All of them goes away. But so tell our fans. Speaking of the receiver position, tell our fans and Packers fans. Obviously, do you think they'll stay in house, or can they? Do you think they'll go after a guy like Odell Beckham, who's a free agent now? And and then there's reports on Twitter that he has him on the list, but I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know Odell Beckham at all. I think he's an incredible talent. When I think about the Green Bay Packers and I think about how they haven't been as efficient on offense this year, it's been a little bit feast or famine. Like the Cincinnati Bengals game was probably no game demonstrated that more. But you always have to look at from Odell Beckham's perspective, you have talent versus all the ancillary things that come with having that person. And so when you see the sideline, tirades, when you see how is he at practice, when you start thinking about all of those things, like really, how does he mix with your team? Is there a chance for him to be a net negative?
Yeah.
Because if there's even a chance he's a net negative, just because of things he's been a very divisive player. Everywhere he goes, he's got a pro and an against camp everywhere he goes. So do we want that right now? Like, do we need this? Because I think Lazard's great. I think MVS is coming back. Yeah. He's great.
Yep.
I love Mercedes Lewis, his best blocking tight end in the league for the last 10 years. We have 2 running backs now that are capable of carrying the load. Like, is this pushing us over the top? Versus like, can we just get our line healthy and then see where we go? I just don't know if it's net worth it to bring him in. Although obviously, like, you put him with Aaron Rodgers and Devontae Adams, you just kind of like your eye, the stars kind of go in your eyes. Like, it clearly feels enticing. But it's interesting. Like when you think about a guy like Odell Beckham, and a lot of the media people are talking about, well, he needs to go to, is he assistant player? Is he a star player? Does he need to go to a place that makes him a star? Well, if that's what everybody keeps saying, he's not a plug and play guy. He needs his 7 plays or whatever. Well, it's like the places that you guys are all talking about, not you guys, sorry, the places the media is all talking about are not places where he's going to walk in and be receiver number 1. Huh. He's not going to be in Seattle, except for New England. New England would be the only place he walks in. He's like, give me all the balls.
Yeah.
Right. I know you got those 2 tight ends you just paid. You give me everything else. He could probably do it there, but they're probably not winning the Super Bowl. So what's the value there for him? Right. So it'll be interesting to see what happens, man. I don't want to have to bite my tongue. So I'm just going to say I'm on the fence about it.
Yeah. So the last 2 things here before we let you go, our team is part of this foundation. It's called the Hugh Jackson Foundation. He's a former NFL coach. He's now the offensive coordinator at Tennessee State with Eddie George. And we're trying to help him prevent human trafficking, making sure the community stays safe, the kids stay safe. So we're in the process of that. So we'll send you the foundation so you can go check it out.
Yeah, cool.
And that's
a noble cause.
Yeah. And because it's still horrible out there what we're seeing, especially with human trafficking. We just need to stop this stuff from happening. Yeah. And the last thing here, would you like to say anything to all the nurses, doctors, and all the essential workers right now?
Well, my wife's a nurse.
Oh, wow.
So to my wife and all the other essential workers, thank you so much. I have intimate knowledge, at least partial intimate knowledge of what the last 18 months have been like. I know the struggles that are going on now to staff medical facilities. I know that a lot of people are just taking travel nursing jobs because of the situations. And I can't imagine what a difficult work environment it's been. And I just hope that we not only say how much we're thankful and respect these people, but anything they need. It's not war. It's not war. I don't want to make a direct comparison to a soldier. But what a lot of these essential workers have gone through is going to result in some PTSD, some things that are very similar to very what's the word I'm looking for? Very kind of difficult situations, right? And we need to be there as a society and help them go through this along the way, because I think there's going to be long-term consequences for what they've had to have seen. And we just need to make sure that we respect in our actions and not just in our words how much help or how much we appreciate the help they've given us.
Yeah, well said there. And tell your wife that we said thank you for her service.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. So there it is. That wraps up episode 933 with former Navy NFL offensive guard Michael Wahle. Go check him out on all social media formats. He now has a show called Process to Perform, and you can he also has a show with Ahman Green, former Green Bay Packers running back. They go over the Packers game each week and dissect the pros and cons of it. And go check that out also. And first of all, I just want to say thank you again for coming on the show, Michael. This is truly an honor, and we would love to have you back on the show at some point down the line so you can meet the full team. But keep up the great work with your podcast and with Ahman Green, and you guys are doing great things. And thank you again.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem.